To the 14th Annual Quantum Storytelling Conference here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. This year and every year we're co-sponsored by True Storytelling Institute and by the Organizational Storytelling Review Journal. So a lot of our presentations get published there. We have a website, quantumstorytelling.org, where you can see the program and all the presenters and what happened at this year's conference. We're going to turn to Myra J HIrd from Canada, who's going to talk to us about the capitalism aspects of waste and the biological aspects of waste. Her work is amazing, and there'll be a discussion of it following the presentation. Thank you.
With kairos, right? A kairotic symbiogenesis, because matter is always vibrating and alive, there's an acousticness to it. And so I still see in your work with waste flows the acoustics of waste. And so those things are always in my, and it's just a delight to meet you.
It is. Yeah, if you have any response, we'd enjoy hearing it.
Respond entirely positively to those like incredibly wonderful, warm words of praise. So, I mean, I feel like I have completely stood on the shoulders of Karen and Donna and Lynn. I was when I got to spend a year in her earth science. Earth System Science Laboratory at UMass. I was in awe of her. I'm always in awe of Karen and Donna, even though we've drank wine together and hung out together. I feel like I'm in awe of everyone else. So
We're in awe of you.
I'm always surprised when anyone's in awe of me. So what I will say is that I think I wouldn't be doing waste research now had I not done that Origins of Sociable Life book, because it was really that book that really cemented my my absolute commitment to understanding, to sort of constantly look for, to seek out the non-normative ways of understanding how this world works, the relationship between the inorganic and the organic, the relationship between the earth and time. These sorts of things. We have in terms of evolution, we have a neo-Darwinian understanding that is sort of the norm understanding. But in doing that research, and reading original Darwin and speaking to apart from the folks I've talked about, the sort of the non-famous, the nitty-gritty researchers, doing incredible work. It really cemented my understanding that if we need to look at all the cracks, we need to look beyond what's on the kind of the mainstream page of knowledge. And I find it's that sort of commitment has never steered me wrong. And in terms of waste, I tend to do, when I got into waste when it was sort of really at the beginning of waste studies, and I'm not talking, engineers have been looking at waste for decades, but in terms of sort of, social science, humanities, when I started doing waste, most of the studies were like, researchers would go into people's homes and then they'd spread their waste, they'd take their garbage out and they'd spread it on some newspaper. And then the researchers would go through and people would explain why they put things in the waste and they'd feel pretty guilty about it, And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to I didn't want to sort of shame and blame people about the individual waste that they produce, because, for me, the structure around that is producing whatever that individual behavior is. So I I was really lucky that when I found waste, I came at it from this different angle, as it were, this different interest. And I was really never interested in sort of what mainstream waste studies was doing. And I remain firmly committed to that. So for better or for worse, I take me where my nose points, and it always points in the direction of the kind of off the grid strangeness of waste.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me get one question in and then I'll come back to you. So we have a number of Indigenous scholars here, and we've been talking a lot. Let me see if I can focus on one. Gregory Cajete and Don Pepillon and Eduardo Barrera. But my question is the Indigenous approach in Canada, and we have some Canadians here, and the Native American approach, it seems like I'm hearing a lot of echoes from what I hear from Gregory Cajete, who wrote a wonderful book on Native science. And I was wondering, do you have a question? Is there a parallel here in what you're hearing, Gregory?
Well, it's waste can be used as a metaphor, or it can be used from the perspective of reality. And certainly, by studying waste, you begin to understand the habits and what kinds of foods and plants. And so I'm trained as a field biologist. So and I remember one of the first classes where we had to dissect the waste of various kinds of animals to figure out what kinds of plants and animals and what they were doing and how much water they had access to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in a lot of ways, this is just a step above that in terms of looking at waste, from humans, which is indeed much more complex and much more telling, I think, in terms of what we use and what we get rid of. And the whole industry has evolved because just before I came to the conference, I took a load of old clothes and old artifacts, to savers, so they can recycle and sell my waste, to someone else. So it's a very interesting kind of situation that I think you're studying, but it's very telling, and certainly I can see where the study of waste really becomes something that is both real but also metaphoric about how we interact with our world, how we participate in our world. And if you study ancient places, which archaeologists do as they study fire pits and other kinds of pits, that early man left. It's very telling about how early man lived as well. So I think in the future, the study of waste, our waste, is going to be very telling about how we lived our life 1,000 years from now. So very interesting.
I got a comment from Don Pepillon that we're almost starting over again, because we have to go way back in time before settler colonialism to perhaps the kind of care we had for the ecology. So I hope I got that right, Don.
Very little was wasted.
Yeah, very little wasted. So I want to respect your time. You are welcome to stay with us all day and all night, but I know you have a busy schedule. Siggy, could you bring her up on the screen? Myra J HIrd. We're bringing you back on the screen. Any response or any final comments?
Well, I'm a big fan of yours, so thank you very much for those insights. Yeah, I completely agree. I think I'm very fortunate. I've been working in some communities in Nunavut for over a decade now, working with communities who are dealing with just an unbelievable, waste crisis. And if we look at all communities in Nunavut, whether they were, well, all of them were the product of settler colonialism, of course. I particularly work in Paniktuk, where that was completely a creation of the RCMP and the government of Canada wanting Canadians to be on that land, in that place, for Canadian sovereignty. And the waste, the pre-colonization waste was an entirely different matter, not just in terms of volume, but in terms of kinds, and in terms of how waste was shared. Waste was if hunting created some waste that was shared with ravens, that was shared with other beings, and then in the space of a very short period, compared with First Nations, compared with the United States, Australia, New Zealand, etc. Inuit were like severely colonized, and the waste crisis in each community is entirely due to that settler colonization, that where you force people into sedentary labor. You enact very strict regulations on hunting and how people can feed their families, and you get people dependent on wage labor, and so you get food that is sent up by ship and by airplane that comes with an unbelievable amount of packaging that's really expensive, that is low in nutrition, and then you leave all of that packaging. Everything that goes north stays north. And whether that's military operations like the famous DEW line, whether that's whatever it is, everything that goes north stays there, except for Southerners who go up there for a little while and then come back down. And it's created this just unbearable, contaminated waste situation where people in communities, including children, are breathing in dump smoke when the dumps catch on fire, or when they're set on fire to lower their volume. And so I don't think, whereas in the south of Canada, we mostly kind of squirrel away, we mostly kind of hide our waste. We don't put landfills in the middle of cities. We put them in other largely poorer communities. But in the north, it's not out of sight and it's not out of mind. It's right there. It's very obvious. And whereas, now communities are being sort of held responsible and blamed for all of this waste that they didn't produce and have, very little power over. So, I find looking at waste issues is a really good way of actually looking at settler colonialism. And that extends across the world, whether we're talking about, Nouvelle-Calédonie or New Zealand, or wherever it is we're talking about. There are waste issues because the root is settler colonialism.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and we're glad we could match you up with our schedule. And it's a great birthday present to me.
And then,
I can ask her about
Something for me to look forward to at age 78. All right, great.
All right. Thank you all very much. It's really been an honor. Thank you so much. Thank you.